we've been waiting for you for a long time. We're excited doing this. We appreciate it. So we want to ask you, we like to go, for everybody, we like to go back to your law beginnings. So what made you decide to become an attorney? And tell us about your law school experience.
Ah. uh, so my grandfather was a lawyer in Czechoslovakia between World War I and World War II. And it's a really cool story that they actually escaped from Czechoslovakia after World War II when the Russians took over or occupied the country. And they immigrated to Buffalo with my mother and my uncle and my grandparents. And he never practiced law again. He couldn't get licensed in the United States, but he would tell me all the stories about working in the little village that he lived in and getting his fee paid with geese or eggs or whatever it was. And he did everything from, he tried capital case, defended a capital defendant in Prague, to just sort of the small village legal practice that he had. So that sort of inspired me, I think, when I was a little kid, and really knew that I wanted to be a lawyer, even high school, college. That was where I was heading.
And describe your law school experience. Tell us about it. Where'd you go? What
Yes.
the years?
Yes, I went to Campbell. I graduated in 1986, and I was one of those students that actually enjoyed it. I felt like I was thriving. Campbell was a small school in Bowie's Creek back then. There were only 100 of us in my class. Got to be good friends with a lot of my classmates. The professors were all interesting people. So I actually enjoyed my law school experience, and felt it was a good part of my life and set me up well for practicing law. So I'm not sure everybody enjoys law school as much as I did, but I thought it was a good time.
So take us from there, your career path from when you left law school. Where did you take it from there?
So I came back to Raleigh. I got married about 2 weeks after I took the bar exam. And actually, my wife and I then moved to Amsterdam for a year. And I did extra year of law school with a fellowship through the Dutch government, studying the law of the European Economic Community. So if you can just sort of imagine the transition from Bowie's Creek, North Carolina to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. But fortunately, I had a very level-headed wife with me. We had a wonderful year living there. It was an interesting year of school, and just had a great first year of marriage, being able to live in a country like that. But then we moved back to Raleigh. I had a job lined up with the firm that I'd clerked with, and then just sort of started a small, I would describe my practice as a general commercial practice. I did litigation for folks, and I represented a lot of smaller to medium-sized businesses doing transactional work and contract drafting, stuff like that. And that's what I did for 20 years, just sort of progressed doing that same type of work. The work got more complex, and the litigation got more bigger and different types of litigation. But that's basically the model that I followed for about 20 years.
And then from there to get to the bench, tell us about that.
Then I ran for a seat in 2006. It was an open seat. A judge had resigned, and so I ran, and it was a contested election. It was a nonpartisan election back in the day, which I prefer judges to run in nonpartisan elections. So I thought it was a good experience. I didn't enjoy campaigning. That's no fun, but raising money is no fun. But it comes with the territory. I knew that I would really find a lot of joy in being a judge if I could attain that. So I thought that it was worth the effort.
So talk about, law school. You said you started law school in 86 or ended law school?
Ended in 86.
You graduated in 86. So talk to us about the significant changes in the legal profession over your career that you see, particularly in Wake County. Like, what have you seen?
Right. Well, the bar's gotten a lot bigger. And I think the way that lawyers practice has changed a little bit. I have a son who's a 31-year-old lawyer, so a young lawyer. And I think the practice has changed a little bit. When I was coming along, you clerked for a firm, and then you likely ended up working for that firm, and you the idea was you'd stay with that firm for a long time and maybe retire with that firm, ultimately become a partner. And I think that young lawyers today are much more nimble. Their practice is much more nimble. I think they can take advantage of changes in the market and the economy and means of practicing and technology faster than we were able to adapt back in the day. So I think they have an advantage there. But I think that also leads them to try out new things that aren't the traditional law firm like I came up with. I think a downside of it is I had some fantastic mentors because I think you get that in a firm environment like I was in, where I worked with some excellent, more senior partners and even mid-range partners who were just very influential on the way that I developed my practice and my ethics and my professionalism. So it's a mixed bag. So those are changes that I see. Of course, Raleigh's grown and a lot more business and a lot more lawyers, and the bar association is much bigger and continues to fortunately thrive. So
And you led me right into my next question. So the role of mentorship in your career, it, you mentioned it as a mentee, also as a mentor. Tell us about that.
I, I think that it's so important to instill. There's so much of the practice of law that is experience based, that you really gain from learning from people who've done it before, but also just sort of the ethics and the ethical decisions and professional decisions that we're called upon to make. Just the tone that we take with our adversaries, or the tone we take with our clients, and the decisions we have to make, and how we're going to actually conduct ourselves as professionals, is something that's best learned by watching people that are known to do a good job in that. So I'll drop names. I mean, Ed Gaskins was my senior partner for many years, and there's no better person to have as a model of ethical and professional behavior than Ed Gaskins. And so I attribute a lot of just the way that I approach problem solving in the legal field and dealing with people in the legal field through I kidded him that I told him that we were going to get these "What Would Ed Do" wristbands to wear, because that really, is a good touch point. What would Ed do in a situation like this? So I think that's sort of a critical thing. I think it's also important. I mean, I like to mentor younger lawyers. I'm active with Campbell Law School still, and I try to seek out opportunities to provide mentorship, because I think it's important for lawyers, young lawyers, to recognize the value of having someone, not that I have answers for them, but I've been around the block for a few times now, so might have some helpful things to say.
And the mentor-mentee relationships, when you move to the bench, you seek some different mentors and some different things. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's one of the beauties of the bench. It is an extremely collegial group across the state. Um, Judges say it all the time that they'll give out their cell phone number and say, "I'll drop everything if I get a call and you have a question for me, so feel free to call me." And that is truly the spirit of camaraderie that we have on the bench. And so I had the privilege back in 2006, 2007 when I started. I mean, there were judges like Don Stevens and Ron Stevens and Chip Height and Bob Hobgood and Judge Osmond. I mean, there were some fantastic judges who were in our division and who rotated through Wake County, and I got to just hang out with them. Howdy Manning. I mean, there were some fantastic people just to hang out with and see how they practice their craft.
And now, I think so many who are now taking the bench would say that they look to you as a mentor. And when there's a new judge who's been elected or appointed, or what's your best advice to them?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a scary thought that, to see myself as a senior, but it's true. There's a handful of us who are still been doing this for a while. But my view of how the court should be operated is that professionalism and sort of the constitutional notion of justice have to prevail. So every question starts there. Is what we're doing professional? Is it transparent? Is it just? Is it neutral? the big principles, the overarching principles. And I think that Wake County has long had a reputation for sort of having that model in front of them as they work through the many issues that come before us, whether it's COVID or e-courts or, overcrowding of the jail or burgeoning dockets. If you start with that in mind, I think that that's where you need to start. So if I'm talking to a new judge or a new judge that's recently been elected to Wake County, those are the types I'm trying to both model, but also keep front and center in our conversations.
I think we got to see firsthand the best of the judges' collegiality when we raised you guys wear rings and shoes.
Yeah, yeah, it's a little outside my comfort zone.
It was definitely said that it was heartwarming to see that bringing levity and coming together for that fun moment. That was really nice to see.
You need a sense of humor in our profession. I'll say it can be grim sometimes, and you need to be able to sit back and have fun every now and then. So
For sure, for sure. Technology's impact. I mean, it's obvious. Tell us about it. Tell us about it when you began versus now.
Right. Yeah. So when I was clerking as a really, I started clerking when I was an undergraduate with a law firm, and they had the very first word processor that I'd ever seen. It had big 8-inch floppy drives made by Tandy Radio Shack, and so I learned word processing then, and I like technology. I'm an adopter. I try to stay not necessarily on the cutting edge, but one step behind. So I'm interested in using technological tools for the practice in our profession. So, and it's certainly changed. I mean, it's revolutionized the way certainly that we do our work. Fortunately, my work has been electronically based throughout my career, but I know for some older lawyers and judges, they used to cut and paste the jury instructions, from a big notebook and hand them to an administrative assistant who was supposed to type them up, which they won't find an administrative assistant who's willing to do that anymore. So they've had to adapt. There's some scary things about technology. AI is something that we, I certainly see it as a great tool for research and writing. I've seen some really good writing coming out of AI, and as long as it's accurate, and then I'm okay with that. I think the greatest fear I have is sort of fabricated evidence, that it's so easy to manipulate images and evidence and videos that I think that's where we just need to be really careful that we figure out how to spot that and put guardrails in place to protect that.
Ethical dilemmas. I feel like, every attorney and every judge can tell you about ethical dilemmas they face in their career. What have been some of the most challenging ethical dilemmas you faced, and how did you navigate them?
Yeah. Well, the one, unfortunately, that comes to us most often is capacity of lawyers caused by either mental health or substance abuse. And those are tricky ethical issues because obviously we want to do what's best for our colleagues in the profession, but we also need to take a role of protecting clients in the system itself. So I find those to be difficult sometimes to navigate. We have some excellent resources. The Lawyer Assistant Program provides some excellent resources on that. But those are type things, and sometimes those come with criminal charges against the lawyer who maybe that's how their problem was disclosed, whether it was, traffic incident or other situation. But those are the types of things that I think are really tough because they're colleagues, and you've just got to approach those with a great deal of compassion for your colleague, but also you got to be tough on those. The ones that I think disappoint me the most are the dishonesty type situations, and maybe I'm a little bit Pollyannish about this, but I like to start with the presumption that a lawyer comes in the courtroom and he or she is following their professional responsibilities and their duty of candor. And I'm always disappointed when I figure out that they're not. And I think those are the ones that I think, like I say, they just disappoint me, and of course, a lot of times I have to take some sanction or something in response to that. But
Case management and managing time and managing all of that through your career. Talk about how you managed that and what you see now with these attorneys and how busy they are and all that.
yeah, well, I'll say, for the first 20 years of my life as a practicing lawyer, I kept track of my time in 6-minute increments, and I hated that. you know, that was not what got me up in the morning was the thought of going in and billing, and keeping track of my time. The second 20 years of my life as a judge, fortunately, that is no longer something I have to do. I'm much more able to control my own deadlines. I have a docket that obviously I'm responsible for, but in terms of when I have completed something is really my decision to make, which I like. I think everybody, lawyers, certainly the courts, are becoming extremely busy and have been. Um, just the pace is growing and growing, and we're short on resources. And I think the lawyers that I encounter in our court system also feel the same way, particularly the public lawyers, like the public defenders, or those who are paid, for representing indigent clients, things of that sort, that they're feeling that strain as well, prosecutors as well. You know, and I think that we work to the maximum. I think a lot of people are feeling they're working to the maximum. I know we are in the court system. We try to take advantage of the technology that we can, but at a certain point, we just have to say, it's just going to take longer for us to do things than we would like to do that, and sometimes that happens as well. I like to say that in Wake County, we manage for volume. We really don't spend a lot of time, uh, allowing for judge shopping or, trying to move cases around for reasons other than simply volume. We're looking for the most efficient way of getting the job done with the resources that we have. And so I think that's because the Constitution requires that we administer justice without delay. So we're cognizant that that's part of our charge, and we're always trying to figure out a way to make things more efficient to the extent we possibly can.
Client relationships and what do you consider looking back at your time at your firm? What do you consider the most important qualities for that successful attorney-client relationship?
Yeah. I probably see it more. I really enjoyed my clients as a practicing lawyer. I found them really interesting because they were entrepreneurs by and large, or business people, and they had sort of a gene that I didn't have, a risk tolerance that I didn't have. I was more cautious than, signing away my house and kids, for a bank loan to start a business. But they had that tolerance. So I enjoyed working with my clients. I think the types of issues I get with clients as a judge really all come down to communication. Some of our best criminal defense lawyers, for example, have terrible bedside manners, and they're going to do a great job for their client in the courtroom if the case goes to trial or if they're negotiating a plea. But the client may not be realizing how good a job that lawyer is going to do for them because the lawyer's just simply not talking to them enough or communicating enough to them. And so I think it so often comes down to just simply communication, to tell the client what it is that you're doing and that you are doing something on their case. Those are really important for the client to be aware of that. Now, there are a lot of difficult clients out there too. So, it's a two-way street. Lawyers have a tough job with a lot of clients, you know, satisfying those clients. So it's certainly not always the lawyer's fault if a client's complaining.
And as you've moved on in your career, you've had some high profile cases come your way. And, it wouldn't be unusual for us to see you on the news. It wouldn't be unusual for Brian and I to be there with cameras to ask you questions. How do you manage the publicity that sometimes comes with some of the cases that you faced in recent years?
Yeah. Well, I start with the premise that the courthouse is a public institution. And again, going to our Constitution, it says courts shall be open. I view an open court being one that means that the public can participate in the business of the court. I think it's important for the legitimacy of the courts. I think it's important for people to understand how courts work. And quite frankly, I'm proud of the way our courts work, and I think it's important for citizens to see this is how we resolve disputes in our court system, even very serious and difficult disputes. So I'm an advocate for that transparency. I think judges have to learn there are lots of distractions that can interfere with the judge's job. If you worry about those distractions instead of worrying about the case, you're not doing a good job as a judge. Now, that can be things like media coverage or publicity, but it can also just be the emotional uh, aspects of cases. Sometimes they're very tragic cases. It can be political implications of cases. And I think judges have to learn very early on to have a set of blinders on and recognize, yes, this is an important case. Yes, this case has political implications or it has media attention, but then set that behind you and focus on the case in front of you and try the case in the interest of justice. And I think that is, if you can't do that, I don't think that you'll do a particularly great job as a judge. You'll be distracted by all of the other noise in the room. So I tend not to pay particular too much attention to things like media or political implications or sadly emotional things. Those are things you just have to put behind you and focus on the law, and managing the case.
Outside of law, we want to ask you a little bit. Tell us about what did you do through your career, or in your what was important to you outside of the law throughout your career?
Uh, I've got a wonderful family. My wife Laura and my sons Isaac and David. They've brought me a lot of joy throughout my years. So yeah, my oldest son's 31 now. My youngest son's 29, and they're just they both live in Raleigh, and we just have a great time with our family. So enjoy that. Um, I as with the younger kids, I was the guy on the sideline watching a bunch of soccer games because that's pretty much what we did every weekend for a long time. We took some great trips, beach trips and mountain trips and stuff like that. But just personally, I love to be outside. I love, activities. So, I bike or I swim or I'm hiking a lot. It's the type of thing I like. I enjoy being outside and being active. So it's the type of thing I do.
And is it your family and your hobbies and things? Talk about the importance of that for attorneys and why that's crucial.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sort of the mind body work life balance that we hear talked about. I really do think it's important. I think it's important that for lawyers to find a way to take care of themselves, whatever that means, whether that's sitting down in the corner and reading a good book, or whether it's being social with your friends, or whether it's going out and swimming, whatever it is that you come back feeling like you've taken care of yourself. I think it's so important because we're in a stressful job. Every lawyer has a degree of stress that's unlike any other profession. We're responsible for other people's problems. We take those problems on, and that's a heavy burden. And I love the fact that the profession is empathetic to each other about that. We recognize that. We create opportunities like the Wake Bar Association, a plug for the Wake Bar Association, for us to get together and talk and socialize and collaborate. But I just think that's so important because that makes you a better lawyer, but it also makes you a better person, better spouse, better parent, better friend, better child, whatever the case may be, is to find that work-life balance. So, and we encounter that in the courts. We know that we'll get motions to continue cases, and I tend to try to keep that in mind when a lawyer's saying, I just can't do this week because I've got a family issue, or I've got, it's like, we get that. We understand.
So, where do you see the future of the profession?
Yeah. I think it is going to continue to thrive in the areas that really make me proud to be in this profession. I think lawyers will continue to be the problem solvers of our society, and I think that's a great space to have a career in, is being able to solve people's problems, take on those problems and solve them. I think we're going to be a profession that is centered and grounded in professionalism and ethics. There are not many industries or professions out there that front and center have a code of professionalism that is enforced and that is as frequent a topic of conversation as we lawyers talk about professional issues. And it's, if you think about other industries, it's just not that common. And, we are a profession where our sort of guiding principle is professionalism and ethics. I think we will continue to be that model. The other thing that I really am so proud about the legal profession and so proud to be a part of that profession is that our job is to seek the truth. I don't think other branches of government are necessarily, their top priority is not necessarily to seek and establish what the truth is. It's not their political function. But the courts, that's what we do. Our job is to seek the truth, determine what the facts are, and then apply the law to those facts. And so much of our profession is centered around that concept, our rules of professionalism, our rules of evidence, the way we do jury trials. We have neutral and neutral judges. All of these things are centered around this sort of ideal that we have of seeking the truth. And so I think in the future, that will also be a guiding star of our profession. I don't see those things changing in the practice of law. The other stuff will. The technology, how we organize ourselves, the type of work we do, all that's going to change. And it's, I think it's going to be exciting times for young lawyers to be a part of that. But I think if the profession keeps its eye on those three things, problem solving, professionalism, and truth seeking, we'll continue to be just fine.
And my last question, your best advice for new attorneys?
Well, I certainly say mentorship, find a mentor, value a mentor. They are invaluable to a young lawyer, and there are a lot of lawyers my age that are very interested in providing mentorship in any way possible, because it's something that I think lawyers recognize as a way of paying back. And I think communicate with your client and keep professionalism front and center. And those would be the things. If you do those things, you're going to have a successful practice. It's going to be. It may not. Success is not necessarily measured in money, but you're going to have a satisfying life in the profession of the law.